You think you know Salem. Witches, history tours, cheap candles, and black cats sold to tourists. But the stories they tell, they're the safe ones. The rest stays buried until someone dies. Tonight, on Night Creepypasta Rules, we follow Detective Kincaid, new to Salem PD, and already caught in a case the textbooks won't touch. A body near Gallows Hill, a ritual gone wrong, and 3 rules passed down like folklore among the local detectives. Rules that keep you breathing, or worse, from becoming part of Salem's history yourself. Stay until the end. There's a moment when the dead whisper your name. And when that happens, Rule 3 is all that stands between you and something watching from the dark. If this one haunts you, leave a comment. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. And remember, the crime isn't always what kills you. Sometimes, it's the name you leave behind. They call it a transfer. Fresh start. I called it exile. From the brass-knuckled reality of Boston homicide, tracking down shooters and dealers, to the kitschy, haunted history tour that was Salem, Massachusetts. Trading gang hits for ghost stories, or so I thought. A penance for the case that went sideways. The judgment call that left a good cop bleeding out and me holding the bag. Then came the first call, before I'd even properly unpacked my cynicism or figured out where to get decent coffee. A body up near Gallows Hill, old house, bad scene, and my new partner, Detective Isabella Diaz, Izzy, telling me the 3 unofficial rules for staying sane, or maybe just alive, while working cases like this. None of them involved Miranda rights. October paints Salem in lurid tourist colors, pointed hats and fake cobwebs, festoon shops selling crystals and kitsch, while guided tours herd sightseers past locations of historical atrocity, repackaged as spooky entertainment. But beneath the performance, something else breathes in the salt-laced air. Something heavy, watchful, and old. It clung like harbor fog as we ducked under the yellow tape, outside the leaning clapboard house on Orchard Street, just a stone's throw from the infamous hill. A small crowd had gathered, phones held high, faces a blend of morbid curiosity and the strange reverence tragedy sometimes inspires. The smell hit first. Sharp, coppery, metallic, overlaid with a scent of damp, decaying leaves and something else. Something cloyingly sweet like rotting flowers trying to mask putrefaction. Izzy Diaz met me there, nodding curtly, younger than me by a decade maybe, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to constantly scan the scene, the onlookers, my own weary face. She moved with the easy, slightly wary confidence of a local who understood the town's dual nature. "Detective Kincaid," she said, her voice crisp, professional, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite decipher. Pragmatism, pity, welcome to the deep end. She gestured towards the house with her chin. Victims inside. Alden Finch, retired professor, history buff. Big surprise there. Looks like he found more genuine Salem history than he bargained for. As we stepped onto the creaking porch boards, she glanced back at the gawking crowd, then lowered her voice slightly. "Just keep an open mind in there, okay? Salem plays by different rules sometimes, official and otherwise." Was it advice or a test of my reaction? Inside, the air was freezing, unnaturally still despite the open door. Dust motes danced in the weak shafts of light piercing through grimy windows. Dr. Aris Thorne, the me, knelt beside the body, sprawled awkwardly in the study, amidst overturned books and scattered papers. Thorne, gaunt and precise, moved with a chilling detachment that rumor attributed to being descended from one of the original Salem judges, or perhaps one of the accused, depending on who you asked. He didn't look up immediately. "Evening, detectives," he murmured, his voice dry as old parchment. "Cause of death is perplexing. Significant exsanguination is apparent, yet I find no corresponding wounds sufficient to explain the volume. No signs of forced entry. He adjusted his glasses, finally glancing up. His eyes magnified and unnervingly direct. And these markings, he indicated crude symbols chalked hastily on the floorboards around the body, are fascinatingly archaic 17th century apotropaic symbols, meant to ward off evil. Rather poorly executed, I might add. Almost an invitation. He sniffed the air. Ambient temperature is also approximately 8 degrees Celsius below the exterior. Anomalous. He returned his attention to the corpse, his clinical curiosity a disturbing counterpoint to the horror. Izzy pointed her phone camera at the symbols. Sending these to Vance. Elias Vance owns the Serpent's Eye bookstore down on Essex. If anyone knows what these scribbles mean, it's him. Minutes later, Vance arrived, looking like he'd stepped out of a different century. Tall, thin, clad in slightly rumpled tweed, despite the mild autumn day, smelling faintly of old paper, Earl Grey tea, and something spicy, like cloves. He peered at the symbols through thick-rimmed spectacles, humming thoughtfully. Ah, yes, he murmured. Protection sigils, classic forms. But the intention, it's all wrong. The lines waver, the circles are incomplete. This wouldn't ward anything off. More likely to draw attention, like shouting challenges into the dark. He surveyed the room, his usual eccentric twinkle, momentarily replaced by a shadow. This house, it has echoes. Alden wasn't the first soul troubled within these walls. He met my gaze briefly, his eyes surprisingly sharp. Be cautious in your inquiries, Detective. History here doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it bites back. After Vance offered a few more historical contexts, and Thorne finished his preliminary examination, Izzy pulled me aside near the study doorway, away from the uniformed officers methodically bagging evidence. Her professional mask was firmly in place, but her eyes held a seriousness that chilled me more than the room's unnatural cold. Okay, Kincaid, she said, her voice low, confidential. The unofficial briefing? The chief looks the other way, pretends he doesn't know. But the detectives who pull cases like this one, the ones that feel wrong, the ones that don't add up right, we have rules. Passed down, detective to detective, not in any manual. You listen, you follow them. No exceptions. Your call if you think it's superstition, but I wouldn't bet my pension on it. I waited. The scent of decay and Thorne's antiseptic spray sharpened my nostrils. Rule 1, Izzy stated, her gaze steady. If you dream about the crime, details, the victim, the location, maybe even the next one, before it happens, you keep it locked down. Don't speak of it. Not to me, not to the chief, not to your damn therapist. Acting on the information discreetly is one thing. Giving the dream voice, she shook her head slightly, that feeds it. Don't. Rule 2. She watched my face closely. Your weapon, if you're in a situation related to this case, and you reach for your service piece, and it feels wrong, heavy, unnaturally heavy, like it's suddenly filled with lead, resisting your grip, holster it immediately. Do not draw the weapon. Fin another solution. Talk. Back off. Use your cuffs, whatever. But don't draw when it feels like that. It means something in the air doesn't want you to. And rule 3. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper, her eyes intense. This one. Pay attention, Kincaid. If you are with a victim, maybe their last moments, and they look directly at you, and they speak your full name, Liam Kincaid. If that happens, you make damn sure you are not alone that night. Call your partner. Call dispatch. Sleep on the couch at the station. Crash with family if you have any nearby. I don't care how, but do not spend the night alone until the sun comes up. You've been marked. Named. You're vulnerable. She finished speaking. The silence in the old house pressed in, thick and suffocating. broken only by the distant wail of a city siren and the almost inaudible creak of the ancient floorboards upstairs. Marked? Heavy guns? Precognitive dreams? Precognitive dreams? My logical Boston homicide brain screamed that this was collective delusion. Small-town superstition run amok. Yeah! The cold in the room, the Mies anomalies, Vance's cryptic warnings. I reached out instinctively, needing a point of grounding reality, and placed my hand flat against the cool wood of the doorframe beside where Alden Finch lay. A jolt, sharp and icy cold, shot up my arm, making me snatch my hand back as it burned. For a dizzying, heart-stopping second, the room flickered before my eyes, overlaid with a different image. Not a memory, not a dream, but a raw flash of visceral terror, darkness, the suffocating feeling of being bound, accusatory faces looming out of shadows, unheard shouts echoing with judgment and hate. Then it snapped back, gone as quickly as it came, leaving only the scent of dust, antique wood, and the undeniable metallic tang of spilled blood, and the chilling certainty that the rules Izzy Diaz had just given me were anything but superstition. Sleep offered no refuge, only a different kind of haunting. The image of Alden Finch, pale and exsanguinated, the crude symbols chalked around him, played on repeat behind my closed eyelids. Then, the scene shifted, coalescing with horrifying clarity. I wasn't at the Orchard Street house anymore. I was standing near the waterfront down by the derelict East Point Wharf, the air thick with the smell of salt, creosote, and decay. A figure lay huddled near a dilapidated shed, shrouded in mist. I knew, with a chilling certainty of dreams, that this was another victim. I saw details. A vibrant red scarf clutched in a lifeless hand, the glint of a small, distinctive silver earring, a freshly carved symbol, identical to the ones at the Finch scene, etched into the shed door beside the body. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom near the water, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, turning towards me. Zimbol. Rule 1 slammed into my consciousness. Don't speak of it. My first instinct was to call Izzy, to report the premonition, the impossible knowledge. But her warning, the weight of local superstition, or protocol, held me back. Giving it voice feeds it. Feeds what? I didn't know. But the fear was real, visceral. At the station later that morning, I played it cool, fueled by caffeine and dread. Izzy, I started, spreading out a map of the waterfront. Call it a hunch, but I was looking over Finch's financials, his known associates, and some whispers about vagrants frequenting those old sheds down there. Maybe we should check it out? See if anyone saw anything unusual the night Finch died. Izzy raised an eyebrow, sipping her coffee. East Point Wall? That place is falling apart. Bit of a long shot based on phone records, Kincaid. Her tone was carefully neutral, but I sensed the scrutiny. Was my hunch too specific? All right, she conceded after a moment. Won't hurt to take a look, I guess. But don't expect much more than rats and rot. Her easy agreement felt slightly off, perhaps too easy. Was she testing me? Before heading to the wharf, the unease drove me to Essex Street, to Elias Vance's bookstore. The Serpent's Eye. It was crammed floor to ceiling with volumes ancient and modern, smelling of dust, binding glue, and dried herbs. Vance emerged from behind a towering stack, pipe smoke curling around his wild gray hair. I described the symbol hypothetically, asking about its historical significance, perhaps related to old maritime rituals or warnings. Vance peered at my crude sketch. Ah, yes. A variation of a binding rune, often misused, meant to contain, but when drawn improperly. He tapped the sketch. It can act as a beacon, especially in places with strong residual energy, like the wharf areas, particularly East Point. Bad things happened there over the centuries. Smuggling, sudden violence, drownings accidental and otherwise. He puffed on his pipe, his eyes sharp. Be careful down there, detective. Belief carries weight in Salem. Fear even more so. They can attract echoes. I drove to the wharf alone first, needing to see if the dream held any water before bringing Izzy. The place was desolate. Collapsing piers, rotting sheds leaning at drunken angles, the gray water of the harbor slapping listlessly against the pilings. I found the specific shed from my dream almost immediately, and there, snagged on a rusted nail near the doorway, was a single strand of bright wool. My blood ran cold. Then the déjà vu hit, overwhelming, making me sway. I had been here before. As I steadied myself, I saw it. A fleeting shadow detaching itself from the side of the shed, impossibly tall and thin, vanishing instantly when I turned my head. Just like the dream, shaken, I scanned the ground near the shed door. The damp earth looked recently disturbed. A small patch churned up, as if something had been hastily buried or uncovered. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just in my head anymore. The red wool fiber was enough to justify an official search, flimsy as it felt under Izzy's questioning gaze. "Good eye, Kincaid," was all she said, her expression unreadable. We canvassed the area, talked to dock workers further down, checked missing persons reports. Nothing solid, just the lingering chill of my dream and the disturbed earth near the shed. We interviewed Alden Finch's distraught nephew again, a nervous young man named Peter, who seemed genuinely grief-stricken, but also evasive about his uncle's recent activities. He was researching something specific, Peter admitted, twisting his hands. Old family lines, property disputes from way back. Said he found something about the wharf area, something that made people angry back then. He couldn't, or wouldn't, elaborate. The air in his tidy apartment felt cold, tense. A few days later, the call came. Another patrol unit, responding to a vagrancy complaint, had found her. Inside the derelict shed at East Point Wharf, a young woman, unidentified, matching the general description for missing persons, though no official ID yet. Red scarf clutched in her hand, single silver earring glinting dully, and carved into the wooden door beside her. Still fresh, the same crude, inviting symbol found at the Finch scene. My dream realized in chilling detail. The nausea rose, hot and acidic. Izzy was already there when I arrived, along with Dr. Thorne. The atmosphere inside the shed was thick with the smell of decay, stagnant water, and that same metallic tang. Thorne knelt beside the body, his examination swift, professional. Similar presentation to Finch, he reported. His voice clipped, apparent exsanguination without sufficient cause. And the symbol, of course. Time of death estimated within the last 12 hours. Izzy was questioning the patrol officers who found the body. They mentioned seeing a shadowy figure slipping away into the fog near the adjacent alley just as they arrived. Tall, thin, one officer said, uncertainty clouding his face. Moved fast. Didn't get a good look, my gut screamed. The figure from the dream. Which way? I asked sharply. The officer pointed towards a narrow, garbage-choked alley between two crumbling warehouses. I'll check it out, I said, already moving, drawing my flashlight. Izzy nodded. Backup's on its way. Be careful. The alley was dark, claustrophobic, reeking of brine and refuse. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom. Halfway down, I saw movement. A flicker of darkness disappearing around a stack of discarded crates at the far end. Police! Stop! I yelled, instinct taking over. My hand went to the Glock holstered at my hip, and froze. The weapon felt like it was bolted to my side. Impossibly heavy, inert, like trying to lift solid iron. My fingers strained, but the gun wouldn't move, wouldn't even shift in the holster. Rule of 2 slammed into my mind. If it feels heavier, don't draw it. Panic warred with ingrained training. I needed that weapon, but the resistance felt absolute, unnatural. I forced my hand away, heart pounding, relying instead on my voice, shouting again, Police! Show yourself. The shadows at the end of the alley remained still. No sound. After a tense minute, I cautiously advanced, flashlight beam sweeping. Nothing, just damp brick walls, overflowing dumpsters, and the oppressive weight of the Salem night. Whoever had been there was gone, or had never been there at all. The feeling of the heavy, immovable gun left me deeply shaken, questioning my own perception of threat. Back at the morgue, reviewing Thorne's preliminary findings, the clinical coldness of the place felt almost welcome after the alley. Thorne confirmed the exsanguination anomaly, the identical symbol. I mentioned trying to sound casual, a moment of hesitation, maybe muscle cramp, when reaching for my weapon earlier. Thorne adjusted his spectacles, peering at me over the rims. Stress manifests unusually under specific atmospheric conditions. Detective, he said smoothly. Adrenaline fatigue, localized humidity affecting grip. Or his voice dropped slightly, a glint of academic curiosity in his eyes. One could consult the Mather diaries, fascinating accounts of spectral lethargy or witch weights inhibiting defensive actions during the 1692 testimonies. Purely historical perspective, naturally. He turned back to his instruments, leaving me cold. Later that night, staring at the crime scene photos on my laptop, trying to force logic onto the illogical, I caught my reflection in the dark screen. For a terrifying instant, the face staring back wasn't mine. It was contorted in a mask of primal terror. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Looking decades older, I recoiled, shutting the laptop abruptly, the image burning behind my eyelids. The investigation hit a wall. 2 victims, exsanguinated, marked with the same symbol, linked only by a shared interest in obscure Salem history and possibly the wharf area. We chased down leads, disgruntled relatives of Finch, known associates of the unidentified wharf victim. We eventually ID'd her as Sarah Bishop, a visiting student researching colonial trade. Every avenue felt like a dead end, interviews yielding nervous denials or superstitious whispers. Evidence seemed thin, almost deliberately scrubbed. The pressure from the chief and the city mounted, and the feeling intensified, not just of being watched, but of being measured. Cold spots seemed to follow me, appearing suddenly in my apartment, my car. Even at the station, I started hearing whispers at the edge of my hearing, indistinct but carrying tones of accusation, of judgment. Sleep was fragmented, haunted by echoes of my dream, by the feeling of that heavy gun. Paranoia became my constant companion. We caught a break, or what felt like one, 3 days later. A 911 call reporting a disturbance, shouting near an old, disused section of the Charter Street Cemetery. We arrived to find chaos, overturned headstones, freshly dug earth, and a 3rd victim, barely alive, lying near a crumbling mausoleum. Young man, maybe homeless, maybe another researcher. He clutched a small leather-bound diary, and the same crude symbol was hastily scratched onto the mausoleum door. Paramedics were working frantically, but his breathing was shallow, his eyes fluttering. I knelt beside him, Izzy right behind me, scanning the surroundings. "Can you tell us what happened?" I asked gently. "Who did this?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto mine with sudden, terrifying clarity and intensity. A flicker of recognition. No. Something colder. Deeper. His lips moved, forming words with his last rattling breaths. He didn't name an attacker. He didn't describe what happened. He looked straight into my soul and whispered, his voice impossibly loud in the sudden hush. "Liam Kincaid. He sees you. Always then." A final shuddering exhale, and his eyes went vacant. The paramedic beside me cursed softly, checking for a pulse, then shook his head. Time of death noted. Silence. Rule 3. Victim's last words are your full name. The world tilted, the sounds of the cemetery, the wind, the distant traffic, the paramedics packing up, faded into a dull roar in my ears. Her face was pale beneath the flickering emergency lights, but her expression wasn't shock or pity. It was a grim, almost practiced determination. "Okay," she said, her voice low, tight, leaving no room for argument. "Rule 3. Now, you're with me tonight, Kincaid. My place. Department protocol. Unofficial protocol. But absolute on this one. You are not spending the night alone." Her insistence felt less like partnership, more like taking custody. The drive to her small apartment near the outskirts of town was silent, suffocating. I felt like a specimen under glass, watched not just by whatever entity had marked me, but by my own partner. I tried calling Jessica, needing to hear a voice from the real world. She answered, heard the tremor in my voice, and dissolved into frantic tears, pleading with me to quit, to leave Salem immediately, offering to drive down herself. Her panic only amplified my own sense of entrapment. Later, unable to even pretend to rest on Izzy's uncomfortable couch, the city lights painting alien patterns on her ceiling, I risked a call to Elias Vance. I explained, my voice barely a whisper, that Rule 3 had been invoked. The line was silent for a long moment. Then Vance sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "The marking," he said softly. "It happens when the influence recognizes a specific focus, an observer who gets too close. The moment of death, the peak trauma, acts as an anchor, imprinting your identity onto its awareness. It attunes itself to you." He paused. "Isolation, detective, is now your greatest vulnerability. When you are alone, especially at night, its influence has clearer purchase. Nightmares, suggestions, paranoia. It will try to wear you down, make you susceptible, make you make a mistake. You were right not to be alone. Stay watchful." Just as I was about to thank him, hanging up with trembling hands, my gaze drifted towards Izzy's living room window. Standing just outside on the fire escape, partially obscured by shadow but unmistakably clear for a horrifying instant, was the figure of the young man from the cemetery. His eyes were fixed on me. He raised a single finger and pointed directly at me. Then he dissolved, melting back into the brickwork and the night. He saw me, always. Being marked changes things. The constant, low-level dread I'd felt since arriving in Salem coalesced into a sharp, persistent prickle at the base of my skull. The feeling of unseen eyes constantly evaluating me, waiting for a misstep. Sleep was shallow, fragmented by echoes of the dying man's whisper. "Liam Kincaid, he sees you, always." Izzy's forced hospitality felt more like house arrest, her pragmatic concern tinged with an unnerving watchfulness. I wasn't just investigating a case anymore. I felt like I was the case, confined mostly to the station or Izzy's small apartment. Under the guise of procedural safety, I threw myself into the files, searching for a pattern that wasn't just superstition. Alden Fink's research notes, salvaged from the first crime scene, were meticulous, obsessive. He, along with a second victim, Sarah Bishop, and apparently the young man in the cemetery, Michael Chen, had all been digging into the same knot of 17th century land disputes and accusations. Specifically, properties near Gallows Hill, whose ownership traced back through families implicated on both sides of the 1692 trials. Accusers and accused. Their descendants intertwined over centuries. The crude symbol wasn't just generic wording. Vance had confirmed it was a bastardized version of a marker used historically to denote contested or cursed land. The entity wasn't just feeding on random fear. It was feeding on the specific energy of accusation, paranoia, and unresolved injustice, rooted deep in Salem soil. It clung to those old wounds like a shroud. And Izzy, Reviewing my notes, her consistent deflections became glaringly obvious. Every time a lead pointed towards one of those historically sensitive properties or prominent local families tied to them, she gently steered us elsewhere, citing lack of evidence, jurisdictional issues, prioritizing more concrete leads that invariably led nowhere. Her intimate knowledge of the rules, her immediate enforcement of Rule 3 keeping me under her watchful eye, it wasn't just procedure, it was control. Late one night, the station quiet, except for the hum of computers and the distant wail of a siren. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I found Izzy in the deserted briefing room, reviewing case files under the harsh fluorescent lights. "We need to talk, Izzy," I said, keeping my voice level, dropping a highlighted copy of Finch's research notes onto the table in front of her. "About this pattern. Finch, Bishop, Chen, they were all poking the same hornet's nest. Old land claims, families tied directly to the trials. The symbol confirms it." She looked up, her expression carefully neutral. But I saw the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. "It's Salem, Kincaid. Everything ties back to the trials eventually. Doesn't mean you systematically steered us away every time those specific names or locations came up," I interrupted, leaning forward. "Doesn't explain why you know these unofficial rules like the back of your hand, rules that conveniently keep investigators isolated, second-guessing themselves or under observation." I tapped the notes. "Rule 3 kept me right where you could see me after I was marked." "Why?" Her professional facade crumbled, not into malice, but into a deep, weary fear, mixed with fierce, almost tribal loyalty. "You don't understand," she whispered, glancing nervously towards the darkened corners of the room. "This town, it has a memory. That thing, the influence, whatever you want to call it, it feeds on dredging up the past, on accusations. Especially those accusations. So you bury the leads, protect certain families, protect the town," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "My family has been here since before the trials. We know how it works. When outsiders come digging, stirring things up, pointing fingers at those old wounds, the influence flares. People get hurt. It needs a focus, Kincaid. Better it focuses on someone poking around the edges, someone disposable." Her eyes flickered towards me, then away guiltily. "In a way, then have it turn its full attention back on the core families, the ones who carry the real weight of that history. I don't know who's doing the killing. Maybe someone unstable, maybe someone influenced by it. But my job, my duty, is to keep the infection contained, keep the balance, even if it means..." She trailed off, unable to voice the implication. She trailed off, unable to voice the implication, even if it means letting it mark me, using the rules to manage me. The cold certainty of her betrayal settled in my gut. The confession, the raw fear and accusation hanging heavy in the sterile air of the station, acted like blood in the water. The entity, wherever it lurked, responded. The fluorescent lights overhead didn't just flicker. They began to strobe violently, casting the room in flashes of harsh white and disorienting darkness. The temperature plummeted, frost instantly blooming on the metal window frames. And the whispers started, not at the edge of hearing now, but inside my head. A cacophony of overlapping voices, ancient and modern. "Accuse her. Liar. Liar. He knows. Your fault, Kincaid." Echoes of Boston. "She protects the guilty. Condemn her." The room seemed to shimmer, the walls momentarily indistinct, overlaid with the ghostly image of rough wooden beams. A crowded courtroom, stern faces staring down in judgment. The weight of centuries of accusation pressed down on me, urging me to point the finger, to join the chorus. My hand instinctively twitched towards my holster. The Glock felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, an anchor dragging me down, resisting the urge to draw, to defend, to attack. Rule 2. The entity was feeding on the confrontation. amplifying the paranoia. Trying to force my hand, Izzy recoiled, her face white with terror, fumbling at her collar, maybe for a hidden charm, starting to whisper a frantic, repetitive prayer or a rhyme under her breath. Something local, protective, utterly inadequate against the storm we do, unleashed. Then a flash of imagery, sharp and terrifying, not a dream, but a projection slammed into my mind. Me, standing over Izzy's prone form, smoke curling from the barrel of my gun, or me, dragged away in cuffs, Izzy pointing, her face triumphant or terrified. Rule 1's echo, a vision of a future crime. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the psychic onslaught, refusing to speak the vision, refusing to accuse Izzy aloud, despite the screaming pressure in my skull. I staggered back, pressing my hands to my temples, trying to anchor myself in logic, in procedure, against the rising tide of paranoia and hallucinatory accusation. Izzy continued her frantic whispering, uselessly trying to placate the unseen. The light strobed. The whispers shrieked. The weight of the gun was immense, and the very air crackled with unseen judgment, pressing in, demanding a verdict, demanding I break the rules, demanding I become another Salem accuser. The psychic storm broke, not with a thunderclap, but with a receding tide. My desperate focus on hard facts, case numbers, forensic reports, the lack of concrete evidence tying Izzy directly to the murders despite her manipulation, seemed to act as an anchor against the hallucinatory tempest of accusation. Shouting verifiable details into the swirling chaos felt absurd, yet strangely effective. The whispering voices faltered, the spectral courtroom flickered and dissolved. The crushing weight of judgment lessened, leaving behind a profound psychic exhaustion and the stale smell of fear. Izzy Diaz crumpled to the floor, not physically harmed, but broken, sobbing uncontrollably. The pragmatic mask shattered, revealing only raw generational terror beneath. Uniformed officers, drawn by the earlier commotion, or perhaps Izzy's own panicked call before the climax, arrived to find a scene of psychological devastation rather than physical violence. Izzy was eventually led away, not in handcuffs, but escorted for evaluation, clearly unfit for duty, muttering about balance, curses, and things outsiders shouldn't stir. Her career was over, her betrayal laid bare, yet she was also just another victim of Salem's long shadow. The immediate supernatural pressure lifted significantly, but the air in the station felt tainted, the silence heavy with unspoken history. I knew with chilling certainty that the entity, the ambient dread fueled by accusation, hadn't been banished, merely quieted. Now the intense emotional discharge of the confrontation had passed, and the mark on me, the chilling echo of Rule 3, remained. A cold spot in my soul, a constant feeling of being watched. With Izzy sidelined, the investigation fell squarely on my shoulders. But now, free from her subtle misdirection, the path seemed clearer, illuminated by the grim light of understanding. I revisited the evidence, Finch's notes, the victim's research. The connection wasn't just general history. It was laser-focused on a specific, notoriously bitter land dispute dating back to the late 17th century, involving accusations of witchcraft, directly tied to property claims near Gallows Hill. The families involved, descendants of both the original accusers and the executed, still lived in Salem, their names woven into the fabric of the town. I presented my focused findings, the specific land deed, the linked family names, to Dr. Thorne. He listened, his usual clinical detachment perhaps softened slightly by the bizarre events he'd peripherally witnessed. He re-examined forensic evidence from all three victims, discovering trace amounts of a rare local clay, unique to the soil composition of that specific contested property, previously dismissed as environmental contamination. It suggests, Thorne stated carefully, polishing his glasses, a common point of origin or contact for all victims shortly before death. Armed with this, I visited Elias Vance again at the Serpent's Eye. I laid out the family names, the land dispute connection. Vance nodded slowly, tamping tobacco into his pipe, his eyes clouded with grim recognition. Ah, the Proctor-Nurse contention, lads. Aye, that runs deep. Poisonous roots. He confirmed the recent resurgence of the dispute, fueled by proposed development plans. Then he identified the potential human element. There's one descendant on the Proctor side. A young man named Samuel Forrester. Always felt his family was cheated. Obsessed with the history, the perceived injustice. Not entirely stable, especially when he drinks. Lives near the old property line. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. An unstable individual, steeped in historical grievance, obsessed with injustice. The perfect vessel for Salem's ambient malevolence to latch onto, amplifying his resentment into murderous rage against those he saw as representing the other sides, against those he saw as representing the other side. Digging into his perceived birthright. The entity didn't need to possess. It just needed fertile, hateful ground to cultivate. The lingering threat felt clearer now. It wasn't just a diffuse haunting. It was linked to specific historical wounds, amplified by human obsession. And I was still marked, still vulnerable, needing to apprehend a killer, potentially operating with a supernatural tailwind. Rule of 3 wasn't just a warning. It was a condition of my continued existence in this town. I meticulously arranged for backup, ensuring I wouldn't be alone when I went to find Samuel Forrester. We found Samuel Forrester not at his listed address, but at the epicenter of his obsession. The dilapidated Saltbox House, standing on the edge of the historically contested land near Gallows Hill. The place felt cold, neglected, filled with Forrester's frantic research. Maps, genealogical charts, printouts covered in angry annotations, and the crude symbol, the bastardized binding rune, was scratched onto doorways, windowsills, even the floor. A desperate, flawed attempt at protection, or perhaps ownership. He didn't come quietly. Forrester, wild-eyed and disheveled, met us on the porch, ranting about stolen legacies, spectral injustices, how the victims deserved what they got, for disturbing sacred ground, for representing the families who wronged his ancestors. He wasn't possessed, not in the way Emily Carter had been, but his paranoia, his grievance, felt unnaturally heightened, amplified, given a sharp, dangerous edge by the unseen influence clinging to this place, feeding on his rage. As we moved to apprehend him, the atmosphere thickened. Whispers seemed to curl out of the shadowed corners of the old house, unintelligible but filled with malice, accusation, aimed at Forrester, at me. The air grew bitingly cold. The air grew bitingly cold. I saw Forrester flinch, glancing nervously at the shadows, momentarily distracted. I moved to cuff him, my hand automatically going towards my hip, towards my weapon, as he made a sudden, unpredictable movement. Heavy. Rule 2. The Glock felt like lead again, resisting my draw with that sickening, unnatural weight. The entity was present, reacting to the confrontation, to the intent. I forced my hand away, relying on training, using leverage and a sharp command to bring Forrester down while fighting the disorienting whispers coiling in my own head. My backup moved in, securing him. Forrester continued to rave as we led him away, spitting accusations rooted in centuries-old disputes, his eyes burning with a conviction that felt both entirely human and chillingly amplified. He was the instrument, the focal point for the entity's latest cycle, fueled by Salem's undying obsession with its own past. The case closed, legally speaking. Forrester confessed, his narrative a tangled mess of historical grievance and paranoid delusion, clearly exacerbated by an external influence neither he nor the courts would ever acknowledge. Izzy Diaz faced a departmental inquiry. Her career in Salem law enforcement was over, though the strangeness of the case likely shielded her from criminal charges. She became another Salem story whispered about, another casualty of the town's tangled roots. I requested, and was granted, a transfer. Back to Boston, perhaps, or somewhere far removed from the lingering chill of the North Shore. I left Salem under a cold November sky, the tourist season over, the town settling back into its quieter, perhaps more authentic, state of watchful unease. The immediate threat felt contained. Forrester arrested, the entity's current focus disrupted, but the mark remained. Months later, living in a nondescript apartment in a city far from Massachusetts, trying to reassemble a semblance of a normal life, the haunting followed. Not with whispers or cold spots, but with quiet, chilling intimacy. One frosty morning, I walked past the bathroom mirror after a shower, steamed over, opaque, but traced clearly in the condensation, as if by an unseen finger drawing from the inside, were two words. Liam Kincaid. I stared, the blood draining from my face. The chill wasn't just memory, it was presence. I wiped the glass furiously, smearing the name away, but the image remained burned onto my retinas. Rule 3 hadn't expired when I left Salem's borders. It wasn't tied to proximity, it was tied to me. The entity, the ambient weight of accusation and history saw me. It knew my name. The casebook could be closed, stamped, filed away, but my own page remained terrifyingly open, marked for a chapter yet unwritten, forever watched by the ghosts of Salem, always. Some cases close with handcuffs, some with bullets, but this one ends with a mirror, and my name written in the steam. I left Salem, I left the shadows, but the rules, they followed me. Because when a dying man speaks your name, you don't go back to your old life. You just pray he doesn't speak it again. Which rule would you break first? Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever dreamed of something before it happened, subscribe. You might already be marked.